Good evening, and welcome to Real Sports, where we begin tonight with a rather unusual and complex story about sex. Now, if you're expecting something titillating or some kind of kiss and tell tale, better you look elsewhere, because the story we have up first tonight is one that deals with sex at its most basic level. It revolves around three people who happen to be sports writers and who felt compelled to deal with the basic question of what truly defines a man or a woman. That they had to do so in a culture of sports that is historically resistant to dealing with anything of a sexual nature made their personal journeys all the more difficult. This is a story about Bob, Chris, and Mike. Three national sports writers working out of New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Each had a home, a wife, and a love of sports. But ultimately, it was something else they shared that brought them together. Bob Dittmeyer, an editor for MajorLeagueBaseball.com, became Bobby Dittmeyer, submitting to an impulse that began at age 4.
You fight it. It's a daily struggle. It's like alcoholism or drug addiction where you have to take it one day at a time and it's a constant struggle.
Chris Carl, who had pioneered baseball writing online, became Christina Carl, a girl trying to find her way.
You're kind of going through like a whole second stage of being a teenager all over again. You get used to bad hair days or figuring out, what was I thinking when I bought that blouse?
And Mike Penner, a sports columnist for the LA Times, became Christine Daniels, and then talked on the radio about the pain of the decision, one that in time cost her life.
When I couldn't get out of bed, when my third antidepressant was failing me, when I couldn't stop crying, I was not suicidal, but I can understand why people would attempt it.
All three had tried desperately to fit in as males. For Dittmeyer, the surest way he knew was sports.
Sports was my connection. It's really how I got through it. I never had a lot in common with the other men in the world, except for sports.
You wanted to just be one of the guys then?
Well, I tried hard to do that.
Growing up, Dittmeyer, like most young men, was attracted to girls. But unlike most young men, he was also jealous of them.
It was a feeling. I couldn't identify what it was. It's almost like an envy in a way.
You belong there.
Right, on the other side.
You're from a big family. Did you share this with anybody?
No, not when I was growing up, no.
Too scared to?
Absolutely. Well, I didn't understand. I had no idea what it was. My first realization was Renee Richards played in the U.S. Open, and they had a story about her, and I started to read it, and it struck me like a bolt of lightning. I was like, oh my God.
That's me.
I had no idea. I didn't know that transsexuals existed. I didn't know anything about gender identity. Nothing.
But Bob Dittmeyer didn't act on his hidden feelings. Instead, he fell in love, got married, and started a life in New York, writing about his only appropriately male interest, sports. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a young Chris Carl was doing the same.
You met your ex-wife in college?
Yes.
Shared concerns when you first met?
No.
Tough question time. Was it a mistake to get married?
It is the thing. Hurting someone, I think, in this way, it is the great regret in my life.
If everything broke their way, they could end up winning 85 games.
As Chris, Carl helped to launch Baseball Prospectus, a stats-oriented website and book series with a strong cult following. But by the mid-2000s, he had taken on a new project, the long and painful process of gender transition.
I was doing things like electrolysis to get rid of my facial hair, or a laser to get rid of my facial hair. I was doing things like growing my hair out, slowly taking up on the lowest doses possible, like estrogen and an anti-androgen, to basically knock down my testosterone level and raise my estrogen levels.
So you've made the psychological switch, and you've made the cosmetic switch.
Exactly. You live as a woman full-time for a year, and then you're eligible for surgery.
Gender reassignment surgery. That's the clinical term, and there's no going back. Chris Carl was headed that way, but Bob Dittmeyer, initially anyway, was afraid.
I didn't believe that a sports writer could transition on the job and do it successfully.
What are you telling me? The culture was too macho? Not tolerant? What?
To stay in the same job with the same athletes in the same locker room, where at the end of one season you're there covering them as a guy, and you show up for training camp in September as a woman. That would be that just seemed to be a little bit too weird for me.
It hadn't been an issue for Carl, who as an online writer has long worked from the comfort of home. Carl's readers only knew something was up when the byline lengthened ever so softly one day from Chris to Christina.
You know, what are the odds of the Mets finishing in 5th place? Which, you know, like, is fun to